The fluorescent lights of County General Hospital buzzed overhead like mechanical wasps as Claire Morrison pushed through the main entrance doors. Rain hammered against the glass behind her, each drop a tiny percussion in the symphony of her exhaustion. 11:15 p.m. Her sneakers squeaked against the polished floor as she walked through the empty lobby. The night shift receptionist offered a sympathetic nod. Claire didn't return it. She was too tired for pleasantries, too hollowed out for human interaction beyond the essential. The parking lot stretched before her like a dark ocean. Her Honda Civic sat alone under a flickering streetlight, looking as worn down as she felt. Claire fumbled with her keys, rain soaking through her cardigan within seconds. Inside the car, she sat motionless. Water dripped from her auburn hair onto her lap. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. Her father's hand had felt so weak tonight, paper-thin skin over fragile bones. He'd squeezed her fingers with what little strength remained, his brown eyes apologetic, as if his dying heart was somehow an inconvenience he was causing her. "Go home, kiddo," he'd whispered. "You've got school tomorrow." Claire turned the ignition. The engine coughed, sputtered, died. "No, no, no, no!" She tried again. The same pathetic wheeze, then nothing. She let her forehead drop against the steering wheel. Of course the car would die tonight. Medical bills were drowning them. Her savings account was a joke. And now this. The rain intensified. Claire sat up, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and tried the engine one more time. This time it caught. The Civic rumbled to life with the reluctant cooperation of something held together by duct tape and prayer. She pulled out of the parking lot slowly, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the downpour. The streets were empty. Most sane people were home, dry, safe. Claire drove on autopilot, her mind still in that hospital room, still watching machines breathe for her father, still hearing Dr. Patterson's careful, clinical words from this morning. The deterioration is faster than we anticipated. We're looking at weeks now, maybe less. Maybe less. Those two words had been echoing in her skull for 14 hours. The traffic light ahead turned red. Claire stopped, watching water cascade across her windshield. Through the distorted glass, she could make out a figure at the bus stop across the intersection. A man, no umbrella, just standing there, completely soaked, staring at his phone with an expression she recognized: frustration, helplessness, the look of someone whose plans had fallen apart. The light turned green. Claire's foot hovered over the gas pedal. She should drive on. She should go home, collapse into bed, and try to steal a few hours of unconsciousness before facing her classroom of third graders tomorrow. Her father's voice surfaced through the fog of her exhaustion. A memory from childhood, maybe age 7 or 8. They'd been driving home from her soccer game when they'd seen a woman with a flat tire on the highway shoulder. "Always help when you can, Claire Bear." "Bear," he'd said, pulling over. "We're all just trying to get home safe." She pulled over to the curb and rolled down the passenger window. The man looked up, surprise crossing his features. He was tall, maybe late 30s, with dark hair plastered to his forehead. His button-down shirt clung to his frame, and he held his phone like it had personally betrayed him. "Need a ride?" Claire called over the rain. He hesitated, that same calculation she'd just done, weighing necessity against caution. "Car's in the shop," he said, stepping closer but not approaching the vehicle. "Transmission failed at the worst possible time. Bus op says the next one isn't coming for 40 minutes. Where are you headed?" He named an address in Riverside District, the nice part of town, where apartment buildings had doormen and underground parking. Claire almost laughed. This guy lived in luxury, and here she was, driving a car that might not survive another winter, offering charity. "Get in before you drown," she said. He opened the door, bringing a gust of cold air and rain with him. "This is incredibly kind, thank you." "Don't thank me yet, the heater's broken." A small smile. Still better than pneumonia. They drove in silence for several blocks. The windshield wipers maintained their rhythmic battle. The man kept his hands clasped in his lap, careful not to invade her space. Claire noticed his fingers were long, precise. A pianist's hands, maybe, or a surgeon's. "I'm Julian, by the way," he said quietly. "Claire, were you visiting someone at County General?" She glanced at him sharply. "How did you know I was there?" "Parking permit sticker on your windshield. Plus, I was there too. Saw you leaving." Claire's grip tightened on the wheel. "My father. I'm sorry." The words were simple, but something in his tone suggested he understood. Not the empty sympathy of someone who'd never sat in a hospital waiting room, but the weighted comprehension of someone who had. "Are you a doctor?" she asked. A pause. "I was consulting with someone on staff." Evasive. Claire didn't push. They were strangers sharing a car ride, not confessionals. Her phone erupted in the cup holder. Mom flashed across the screen. Claire's stomach dropped. 11:40 p.m. Her mother never called this late, unless... She snatched up the phone. "What happened?" "It's your father." Martha Morrison's voice was thin, stretched tight. His oxygen levels dropped. They stabilized him, but Claire, the doctor said, "I'm coming back." "No, sweetheart, there's nothing you can do tonight." They increased his medication. He's resting now, but Dr. Patterson wants to meet with us first thing tomorrow morning. She said we need to make decisions. Soon. Claire's vision blurred. She blinked hard, forcing the tears back through sheer will. Okay, I'll be there at 7. Get some sleep. You too, Mom." She ended the call. Her hand was shaking. "I'm sorry," Julian said again. His voice was different now. Lower. "Whatever you're facing." Claire nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She focused on driving. Turn here. Merge there. Red light, stop. Green light, go. Simple tasks, because her body could perform while her mind splintered. They reached Riverside District. The buildings here were all glass and steel, architectural statements with landscaped entries. This one, Julian indicated a particularly upscale building. Claire pulled to the curb. Julian reached for the door handle, then stopped. He turned to face her, and in the ambient glow of the streetlights, she could see his expression clearly for the first time. Concern. Real, unguarded concern from a stranger. "I hope your father..." He seemed to struggle with what to say. "I hope things improve." "Thanks for not being an axe murderer," Claire managed. A weak attempt at humor. His mouth quirked. "Thanks for the ride, and for not being one either." He stepped out into the rain, then leaned back down. "If you ever need anything..." He stopped himself, seemed to recognize the absurdity of the offer. They were strangers. "Take care, Claire." He closed the door and jogged toward the building entrance. Claire drove home on autopilot. Her apartment was small, a one-bedroom in a complex that optimistically called itself garden-style, despite having exactly 2 dying shrubs out front. She climbed the stairs to the second floor, key scraping against the lock twice before finding its home. Inside, the space was dark and quiet. Claire didn't turn on lights. She dropped her purse on the counter, noting the stack of mail she hadn't opened. Bills, probably. More medical statements detailing exactly how much it cost to watch someone die slowly. Her laptop sat on the kitchen table, surrounded by printouts. Touts. Research. Medical journals. Experimental procedures. She'd been reading everything she could find about advanced heart conditions, as if enough information could somehow change the reality. Claire collapsed into the chair and woke the computer. An email from Dr. Patterson's office waited in her inbox, sent 2 hours ago. Subject: Consultation, Surgical Options. She opened it. The email was brief, professional, devastating. Robert Morrison's condition had deteriorated beyond what conventional surgery could address. However, there was one possibility: an experimental valve replacement procedure, highly complex, with limited surgeons qualified to perform it. "I've reached out to a colleague who specializes in this technique," Dr. Patterson wrote, "Dr. Julian Hart. He recently relocated to our area and may be available for consultation. I should know more in the next 24 hours. Claire stared at the name. Julian Hart. She opened a new browser tab and typed his name into the search engine. Articles populated immediately. Medical journals praising his innovative approaches to cardiac surgery. Awards, recognition as one of the top surgeons under 40. Then, 6 months ago, the tone shifted. Prominent surgeon faces lawsuit after patient death. Hart cleared of wrongdoing, but questions remain. Medical community divided over Hart controversy. Claire clicked through article after article. The story emerged in pieces. A surgery that went wrong, a patient who died on the table, accusations of negligence, an investigation that cleared him legally but couldn't clear his reputation. The photos showed a different man than the one she'd just driven home. This Julian Hart wore expensive suits and confident smiles. He stood at podiums, accepted awards, shook hands with hospital administrators. The man in her car had been tired, guarded, human. The patient's family maintains that Hart was reckless, one article quoted. Hart has declined all media requests for comment. Claire read until her eyes burned. When she finally closed the laptop, it was past 2 in the morning. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about her father's weakening grip, about Dr. Patterson's careful hope in that email, about a stranger who'd stood in the rain because his car was broken, about the possibility that the only person who could save her father was someone the world had already judged. Sleep didn't come. Outside, the rain continued its relentless percussion, washing the city clean of nothing at all. Claire arrived at County General at 6:50 a.m., carrying 2 cups of gas station coffee and approximately 3 hours of fractured sleep. The morning light felt accusatory, exposing every worry line around her eyes. Dr. Patterson's office was on the 3rd floor. Claire climbed the stairs instead of taking the elevator, needing the physical exertion to center herself. Her mother was already waiting in the hallway, perched on the edge of a chair like a bird ready for flight. Martha Morrison looked smaller than she had yesterday. Grief did that, Claire thought, compressed people into diminished versions of themselves. They embraced without sound words. The consultation lasted 17 minutes. Dr. Patterson explained what Claire had already read in the late-night glow of her laptop screen. Robert's aortic valve was deteriorating rapidly. Traditional replacement surgery carried too much risk given his weakened state. But there was one option. Dr. Julian Hart, Patterson said, adjusting her wireframe glasses. He's pioneered a minimally invasive technique that might work. I've contacted him, and he's agreed to review Robert's case. When? Claire asked. He should be here this morning. I'll page you when he arrives. Claire spent the next 2 hours in her father's room. Robert was awake, sort of. The medication kept him floating in a space between consciousness and dreams. He recognized her, squeezed her hand, drifted away again. She was reading to him from the sports section, her voice a monotone recitation of baseball statistics he wouldn't remember, when her phone buzzed. Dr. Patterson's message was brief. Conference room B, now. Claire kissed her father's forehead and left. The conference room was small, dominated by a table scattered with medical charts. Dr. Patterson stood near the window. Beside her was a man in surgical scrubs, his back to the door, studying an X-ray mounted on the light board. He turned as Claire entered. Recognition hit her like a physical blow. Julian's expression mirrored her shock. His eyes widened fractionally before professional composure slammed back into place. "You," Claire breathed. Dr. Patterson glanced between them. "You two know each other?" "We met briefly." "Fly," Julian said carefully. "Last night, Miss Morrison gave me a ride. The coincidence felt impossible. The stranger from the rain, the surgeon from the articles, the only person who might save her father, all condensed into one man standing 3 feet away. Small world," Claire managed. "Indeed." Julian's tone was neutral, but something flickered behind his eyes. Concern, maybe? Or wariness. Dr. Patterson, oblivious to the undercurrents, gestured to the X-rays. "Dr. Hart has reviewed your father's charts. I'll let him explain." Julian moved to the table, his demeanor shifting into clinical precision. Your father's aortic valve has significant calcification. The traditional surgical approach would require opening his chest completely, putting him on bypass. Given his current cardiac function, survival rate for that procedure would be approximately 20%. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. However, Julian continued, there's an alternative, a catheter-based valve replacement. We go in through the femoral artery, guide the new valve into position without open-heart surgery. It's less traumatic, faster recovery. What's the success rate? Martha asked. She'd entered quietly, standing near the door. Julian met her gaze directly. For healthy patients, 60 to 70%. For someone in your husband's condition, I'd estimate 40%, maybe 45%. And without surgery? Claire's voice was steady, despite the earthquake inside her chest. 2 weeks, possibly less. Silence filled the room. Mathematics of mortality, 40%. Percent chance of life versus 100% certainty of death. There's something else you should know, Julian said. He pulled out a chair, sat down, and gestured for them to do the same. This wasn't doctor-to-family positioning anymore. This was human to human. 6 months ago, I lost a patient during a similar procedure. It was ruled unavoidable. The patient had undisclosed medical history that created complications, but the family sued. I was cleared legally, but my reputation took damage. Some people believe I was reckless. I left my previous position because the controversy made it impossible to practice effectively. Claire watched her mother's face tighten. Dr. Patterson was my mentor in medical school, Julian continued. She offered me a position here. No spotlight, no media, just medicine. But you deserve to know who's holding the scalpel. I won't hide from my failures, and I won't pretend they don't matter. Martha's hands twisted together in her lap. Why should we trust you? You shouldn't, not blindly. Julian's voice was quiet but firm. Trust should be earned. Look at my surgical record. All 23 valve replacements I performed before the one that failed were successful. Talk to Dr. Patterson about my competence. Make an informed decision, not a desperate one. We are desperate, Martha said. I know, that's why you need to be careful. Claire found herself studying him. The Julian from last night, soaked and stranded, had seemed lost. This version was controlled, professional. But underneath both was something else. A man who'd been at... I want to see my father first, Claire said. I want you to meet him first, Claire said. I want you to meet him before we decide anything. Julian nodded. Of course. They walked to Robert's room in a strange processional. Dr. Patterson led, then Julian, then Claire and Martha, trailing behind like mourners at a funeral that hadn't happened yet. Robert was more alert now, propped up against pillows. His gray hair stuck up at odd angles, and his face brightened when he saw Claire. "Morning, sweetheart. You look terrible." "Thanks, Dad. Love you too." "Who's this? My fan club growing?" Julian stepped forward, extending his hand. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Dr. Julian Hart. I'm here to evaluate whether I can help you." Robert's grip was weak, but he held on longer than necessary, studying Julian's face with the intensity of someone who'd spent 40 years in construction, reading people before trusting them with heavy machinery. "You any good?" Robert asked. "I'm very good, but I'm not perfect, and this surgery carries significant risks." "Straight shooter, I like that." Robert coughed, winced. "So you're gonna crack me open like a walnut?" "Actually, no. If we proceed, I'll go in through your leg. You'll have a small incision, not a chest scar." "Modern medicine," Robert wheezed. "What'll they think of next?" Julian examined Robert with efficient thoroughness, listening to his heart, checking circulation, asking questions about symptoms.
Claire watched her father respond, saw him making jokes despite obvious pain. Got this stubbornness from his grandmother, Robert said, tapping his chest. She lived to 97 out of pure spite. Maybe my ticker inherited that. Stubbornness helps, Julian said, a small smile crossing his features. Surgery is 50% skill, 50% patient will to survive. After the examination, they reconvened in the hallway. Julian's expression was carefully neutral. He's a viable candidate. Weak, but viable. I need to be transparent about the timeline. His condition will continue deteriorating. If we're going to do this, it needs to be within 72 hours. 3 days, Martha whispered. I know it's fast, I know it's terrifying, but waiting longer decreases his chances exponentially. Claire looked at her mother. Martha's eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. Can we have some time, Claire asked, to discuss it? Take the time you need, Julian said. I'll be here. He walked away, his footsteps measured and even. Claire noticed he didn't look back. That evening, Claire sat in the hospital cafeteria, surrounded by half-drunk coffee cups and printouts of Julian's surgical history. She'd spent hours cross-referencing articles, reading medical board reports, even finding online forums where former patients discussed their experiences. The consensus was consistent. Julian Hart was exceptionally skilled. The surgery that went wrong had been a tragedy, but the investigation found no negligence. Mind if I sit? She looked up. Julian stood there holding a tray with a sandwich he clearly had no intention of eating. Free country, Claire said. He sat. Across from her, noted her research materials. Find anything interesting? You have excellent reviews on health grades. The internet is a strange place to stake your father's life on. Better than nothing. Claire pushed the papers aside. Why are you really here, at County General? Julian was quiet for a moment, staring at his untouched sandwich. Because I needed to remember why I became a surgeon. I was getting too comfortable in the spotlight. Awards, conferences, photo opportunities. Then a patient died, and I realized I'd stopped seeing people as people. They were successes or failures, statistics for my career advancement. That sounds like rehearsed therapy speak. He laughed, a surprised bark of sound. It probably is, but it's also true. I came here to practice medicine without the noise, to save lives, not build a reputation. Claire studied his face, looking for deception and finding only exhaustion that matched her own. Okay, she said. Okay. Do the surgery. Save my father. Julian leaned forward. You're sure? No, but I'm out of better options, and he's out of time. She met his eyes. You brought yourself home safe through that storm last night. Now bring my father through his. I'll do everything I can. I know. And strangely, terrifyingly, she did. The surgery was scheduled for 6 a.m., 48 hours after Claire gave her consent. Those 2 days passed in a blur of preparation, consent forms, and pre-operative protocols that felt both endless and far too brief. Robert was moved to a private room. His condition stabilized slightly. Gently with adjusted medication, enough that he could joke with the nurses and pretend he wasn't terrified. Claire barely left the hospital. She slept in the vinyl recliner beside his bed, ate vending machine meals, and watched the clock advance with cruel efficiency. Julian appeared periodically, checking vitals, explaining procedures Claire only half understood. He was professional, thorough, distant. The man from the cafeteria conversation had retreated behind surgical precision. The night before the operation, Robert was awake and lucid. Martha had gone home to shower and change. It was just father and daughter in the quiet darkness. I'm scared, Claire Bear, Robert said softly. Claire took his hand. Me too. If something goes wrong, don't. Listen to me. His grip tightened with surprising strength. If something goes wrong, I need you to know I'm grateful
For you, for your mother, for every single day I got. That's enough. That's more than enough. Tears streamed down Claire's face. It's not enough for me. I know, sweetheart, but whatever happens tomorrow, you did everything right. You hear me? Everything. She kissed his forehead and stayed there, holding his hand, until he drifted into medicated sleep. At 5:30 a.m., orderlies came for Robert. The pre-op checklist was completed with mechanical efficiency. Claire and Martha walked alongside the gurney until they reached the surgical wing's restricted doors. Robert squeezed Claire's hand one final time. "See you on the other side, kiddo." The doors swang closed. Claire stood frozen, staring at the place her father had disappeared. Martha's arm wrapped around her shoulders. "Now we wait," Martha whispered. The surgical waiting room was painted an optimistic yellow that felt like mockery. Claire and Martha claimed chairs near the window. Time became meaningless. Minutes stretched into hours. The clock on the wall ticked forward with infuriating consistency. 6 hours passed. 7, 8. A nurse emerged periodically with updates. "Surgery is progressing. Dr. Hart is working through expected complications. Your father is stable." Expected complications. The phrase lodged in Claire's chest like shrapnel. At hour 9, the waiting room door opened. Julian stood there, still in surgical scrubs, a cap covering his hair. His face was unreadable. Claire's heart stopped. "There were complications," Julian said. The world tilted. Martha's hand found Claire's, gripping hard enough to bruise. "He's alive," Julian added quickly. "But there was unexpected scar tissue from previous cardiac events. I had to make adjustments to the valve placement. The surgery took 8 hours instead of 6. "But he's alive?" Claire's voice didn't sound like her own. "He's in ICU, critical but stable. The next 72 hours will tell us if the valve is functioning properly." Julian's professional mask slipped slightly. "He's a fighter, Miss Morrison, just like his daughter." Claire's legs gave out. She sank into the chair, her body finally acknowledging the terror it had been suppressing for 9 hours. Martha was crying, relief and fear tangled together. "Can we see him?" Martha asked. "Soon. They're settling him now. I'll have a nurse come get you." Julian turned to leave, then paused. "He told me to tell you something. Right before we put him under, he said to tell Claire that her lousy parallel parking wasn't hereditary, so she had no excuse." Despite everything, Claire laughed, a broken, wet sound, but genuine. The ICU was a forest of machines. Robert lay motionless in the center, tubes and wires connecting him to technology that breathed and monitored and sustained. His chest rose and fell with mechanical precision. Claire took the chair beside his bed. She didn't let go of his hand for the next 72 hours. Martha brought changes of clothes, food Claire didn't eat, magazines she didn't read. Nurses cycled through, checking monitors, adjusting medications. Julian appeared twice daily, examining readouts with intense focus. On the second day, Robert's oxygen levels improved, heart rhythm strengthened, small victories that felt monumental. On the third day, they reduced sedation. Claire was dozing in the chair when she felt pressure on her hand. Her eyes snapped open. Robert's fingers were moving, squeezing weakly. "Dad?" she whispered. His eyelids fluttered, opened, confused, unfocused, but open. "Hey, kiddo," he rasped around the breathing tube. Claire pressed the call button, tears already streaming. A nurse rushed in, followed moments later by Julian. "Welcome back, Mr. Morrison," Julian said, checking pupil response. "You've been sleeping for 3 days." Robert tried to speak, couldn't around the tube. Frustration crossed his face. "We'll remove that soon," Julian assured him. "Let me check a few things first." The examination took 20 minutes. Julian worked with methodical care, asking Robert to squeeze fingers, move toes, follow lights with his eyes. Each response was documented, measured, evaluated. Finally, Julian stepped back. "Your heart is beating strong, Mr. Morrison,
The valve is functioning exactly as intended. Robert's eyes welled up. Claire saw her father cry for the first time in her life. Over the following weeks, Robert's recovery progressed in increments. The breathing tube came out on day 5. He sat up on day 8. Physical therapy began on day 10, painful and exhausting. Claire maintained her vigil, teaching her classes during the day and returning to the hospital each evening. Julian continued his twice-daily check-ins, gradually transitioning from surgeon to supervising physician. Robert and Julian developed an easy rapport. Robert told construction stories about buildings that still stood downtown. Julian shared surgical anecdotes, carefully edited for squeamish sensibilities. On day 18, Robert walked the length of the hallway with a walker. It took 15 minutes and left him exhausted, but he made it. "Stubborn Irish grandmother," he wheezed, grinning. On day 21, discharge paperwork was signed. Robert was going home with a medication schedule, physical therapy appointments, and dietary restrictions he'd definitely complain about. Claire helped him into a wheelchair for the hospital exit protocol. Julian appeared with the final discharge paperwork.
Discharge instructions. Follow up in 1 week, he said, handing Claire a folder. Any chest pain, difficulty breathing, irregular heartbeat, call immediately. Will do, Doc. Robert extended his hand. Thank you for giving me more time. Julian shook it carefully. Thank you for fighting so hard to stay. An awkward pause settled over them. Claire felt the weight of gratitude too large for words. You should come to dinner, Robert said suddenly, when I'm back on my feet properly. Family dinner. Nothing fancy, just Martha's pot roast and Claire's terrible attempts at baking. My baking is not terrible, Claire protested. Sweetheart, your brownies once set off the smoke alarm. Julian smiled, but hesitated. I don't want to intrude. You wouldn't be, Claire heard herself say. Seriously, it's just dinner. Something shifted in Julian's expression. The professional distance cracked slightly. Okay, I'd like that. 6 weeks passed. Robert graduated from walker to cane. Color returned to his face. He gained back 10 of the 15 pounds he'd lost. The weekly checkups showed consistent improvement. Claire found herself looking forward to those appointments more than was strictly professional. Julian was different outside the surgical context. Still careful, still measured, but warmer. He asked about her teaching, remembered details she'd mentioned in passing. After one appointment, they'd grabbed coffee in the hospital cafeteria. Then again the following week. Small conversations that extended beyond medical necessity. The dinner invitation was finally scheduled. Scheduled for a Saturday evening. Claire helped her mother prepare, arranging place settings while Martha fussed over the pot roast. He's a good man, Martha said, not looking at Claire. He's Dad's doctor. He's also the person you smile at in a way you haven't smiled since Brian left. Claire's ex-boyfriend felt like ancient history. I smile at lots of people. Not like that. The doorbell rang before Claire could formulate a response. She opened it to find Julian holding a bottle of wine, looking nervous in civilian clothes. Button-down shirt, dark jeans. No surgical scrubs, no hospital ID badge. Just a man coming to dinner. Hope I'm not early, he said. Perfect timing. Dinner was easy in a way Claire hadn't anticipated. Robert dominated conversation with embarrassing stories about Claire's childhood. Martha kept refilling wine glasses. Julian laughed genuinely, shared his own awkward adolescent moments. After dessert, Robert insisted on showing Julian his workshop in the garage, despite Martha's protests about him overdoing it. Claire started clearing dishes. Leave those, Martha said. Go make sure your father doesn't try to operate power tools while medicated. Claire found Robert and Julian examining a partially completed birdhouse. Her father was gesturing animatedly, explaining wood grain selection. Julian listened with genuine interest. I should probably get going, Julian said when he noticed Claire. Early shift tomorrow. I'll walk you out. The night air was cool, carrying the first hints of autumn. They stood by Julian's car, street lights casting long shadows. Thank you, Claire said, for everything, for saving him. Thank you for trusting me when you had every reason not to. A pause stretched between them, comfortable and charged simultaneously. "Can I ask you something?" Julian's voice was quiet. "That night in the rain, when you picked me up, did you hesitate?" "Yes." "But you stopped anyway?" "My dad taught me to help when I can, even when it's scary." "I'm glad you did." Julian's eyes held hers. "I'm glad our paths crossed." "Me too." He reached out, hesitated, then gently squeezed her hand. Brief contact, but it felt like punctuation on an unfinished sentence. "Good night, Claire." "Good night." She watched him drive away, something warm unfurling in her chest. 5 months later, Claire was grading papers at her kitchen table when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Coffee? JH?" She smiled, typing back, "Only if you're buying. You still owe me gas money." "Fair enough. Saturday?" Claire glanced at the photo on her desk. Recent picture from last weekend, her and Robert at the park. Both healthy, both smiling. Her father's arm around her shoulders, his grip strong and sure. She replied, "Saturday works." Outside her window, the city moved forward. People helping people. Paths crossing and diverging and crossing again. Strangers becoming something more through small acts of courage in the rain. Claire saved Julian's number and returned to her papers, but the smile didn't fade. Sometimes detours became destinations. Sometimes the people you needed arrived exactly when you were ready to let them in.